Hello and welcome back to Live Now with Venu and Chuck. I am your host, Venu Keller, along with my amazing co-host, Chuck Hoban. We want to welcome you to Spanglish World Network and her network on Zingo TV's channel 250 and 251. Please remember to download both the Zingo TV app on respective app stores and on iOS and Android devices. While you download, make sure to rate and leave a comment. The app is free. Zingo TV is also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire, Fire Sticks, Roku Sticks, and all smart TVs 2016 and forward. Well, here we are again, my friend. Another Monday, another chat.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful, you know what? I love it. Every week I get to start the close of my first day of the week of business, and I get to see my beautiful friend, and we get to have some amazing discussions. So thank you all for joining us tonight. This is going to be a fun one. This is we're getting down to the nitty gritty of some of the things that you and I we were just talking before the show, and it's like going, wow, it really is kind of the foundation for how most of us make decisions.
Right. Pain or pleasure.
That's it. It's the pain and pleasure principle. I mean, Janet Jackson sung about it, and it's pain and pleasure. And why is it such a big deal, Venu? Well,
so you know what? It's interesting because you and I both have grown up, per se, hearing that we do more to stay away from pain than we do pleasure. And I've really taken that term into researching it, and so being that I coach parents and I coach kids on a daily basis for years, this is my niche. I started to look at, even with my own parenting, and Chuck, and I'm sure that you can vouch for this too, how many times we raise our voice, how many times we say things to them out of anger, frustration, and they fear us in that moment. But all of a sudden we get the response we need, right? The bickering stops between the kids. They get in the shower. They mind their own business, if you would. Whatever it takes, it's like you could say to your kid, you know what, it's time to get in the shower. I'd really appreciate it. We got a lot of things to do. Okay, Mom, I'm going to. And they know, because we've trained their brain 5 times to have that, if you would, and I'm doing these air quotes because they say, just one more time, just one more time. It's like, just 5 more, I'm going to. And then as soon as they see us or they hear our voice, all of a sudden it's like, boom. Oh. I'm getting in the shower. So what is that about? Again, they will do more to stay away from the pain than knowing the pleasure of what it feels like. For me, in the morning, I have my morning routine. I go to the gym. I come back. It feels so good to have that amazing shower and to start my day off feeling so clean. Like, that's the pleasure of my shower. I don't have to make a decision off the pain. No. That's what my kids do each and every day. Like, literally, shower time in my house, I have it on my calendar. Who goes first, Sam or Sage? They will come to my office, knock on the door. Even during the show, they'll come look at me and they'll say, whose turn is it? And I'll look on my calendar and I'll say, which one? Because they know that they don't want to get in trouble. Yep. And again, they're not showering because it feels so good. They're showering because they want to stay away from the pain of being in trouble, yelled at, whatever the consequences are. So what I realized is that we as children have been raised with the same principle. I will make you fear me so you behave right, than telling you what the pleasure of making the right choices gets you, right? The rewards of it. And now as adults, we're faced with the same thing. Are we making a decision because we're fearing what the opposition is, or are we making the choice because it's going to bring us pleasure? So with that, I could tell you some things that I made choices out of pleasure when I married my husband, when I had my children, these were all choices, because people say, well, of course you kept your children. Well, there's a lot of choices us women get to make in this world. Do we want to keep them? Do we want to give them up for adoption? I'm not one for abortion, but that is people's choices. So, and we are a controversial show, so we'll go ahead and talk about that. The point is that some of these choices were made out of pure pleasure.
Definitely.
But not the majority of my life.
Well, and it's interesting you say that. I was just thinking about that. I was like going, because bath time with the kids when they were little was such a pleasurable event.
Right.
It was always associated with fun and cleanliness and warmth. And even to the point where, like, even when the kids showered with us when they were young, you'd hold the baby And people go, wait, what did you do? It's like, yeah, because they enjoyed it. And it was like the water would hit them, they'd fall asleep on your shoulder. I mean, all these amazing things. Yes, they were slippery as all get up. So I mean, you have to be really careful. You're like, okay, whoa, that was a close one, honey. It's like, well, let's soap next time. And so part of this is that at some point in time, when it becomes a chore, like,
Mm.
when did the meaning of bath time shift or a shower shift? And it's when responsibility came along with it, when there was an expectation that came along with it, rather than it just being for the sheer joy. And to your point, it's like going, wow, when did I get frustrated when my kids weren't bathing? And it's like going, hmm, hmm. Because now as young adults, I don't have to tell them. I'm like going, could you get out of the shower? There's no hot water left. And so as young adults, and you're like going, wow, you've been in the shower for a long time. And it's like, well, when I was younger, it's like, holy smokes, we come full circle.
Yeah.
And so pain and pleasure is literally about perception. And it's about managing expectations as well, isn't it? I mean, because when we think about it, I was like going, okay, we can go back to the purpose and why and the habits that we just talked about last week, how rituals become habits. And the difference is motive and intention and what you take mammoth action on a consistent basis. And so like bathing, we can use that and go, well, that's a daily, hopefully, I know for some people, I'm like, could you just
Please shower.
something like, here's a hose.
Here's Febreze.
Boom, close the door. Sorry. Oh, you asphyxiated? My bad. But boy, it smells a whole lot rosier in here than it did 5 minutes ago.
Yes, it does.
But fermentation is not good. Just letting you know. If you're kimchi, it's great, but outside of that, no.
Not so much.
So part of this is the pain and pleasure principle is exactly what you were talking about, my dear friend, and that is avoidance. It's like, what is the perception of the pain? And this is kind of the crazy part, because I love what you said about your kiddos, and that is they'll do it eventually. So it's almost like, okay, what's the timer? It's like a 6-minute egg or a 5-minute egg. It's like, what's the timer? Because for them, they're not going, we know we've got to do it because there's a stopping point. But mom's fuse is X or dad's fuse is X. So they'll check in, they'll push the envelope. Why? Because they're testing boundaries, and that's what their job is. That's what their privilege in life is to push boundaries so they can see exactly where the frame of the rules are.
Well, it's when they push the boundaries that we start to train their brain that they can get away with it, right? That's literally in those years when people call them the terrible twos.
Yes.
And they rather just give into the behaviors because they don't want the behaviors. They're putting that Band-Aid over it. What they're really teaching their kid is that, you mean if I scream louder, I actually get dessert before dinner? You mean to tell me if I ignore you, you'll actually end up closing the door and I don't have to come back out of my room downstairs to close the door because I just happen to not hear you 10 times to tell me to close the door? You mean you're going to do it?
Isn't it interesting? And it's like, wow, we're the ones that conditioned the behavior.
Correct.
And yet we're the same ones, I'll speak for myself, that had levied judgment. I was like, where did you get this from? You used to be such a nice kid. It's like, what happened to you? It's like, I remember when you were gregarious and fun loving. And it's exactly at that point you're like going, ooh, 2s, 3s, maybe 4s for some if they're late bloomer 5. Or now all of a sudden it's like, oh, you little deviant. It's like, where did you get this behavior? It's like, oh, well, school. Johnny does this. Jane does this. And it's like, oh, okay. So because the Smiths do it, the Hogans are going to do it, or the Kellers are going to do it. And they're like, well, they said this, they do this, they play these games, they get to go to bed at this time. And it's like, oi.
You know, my mom used to say, because I'd always tell her, because my best friend Tiffany, Tiffany's mom lets her, she says, well, I am not Tiffany's mom. Right. And if you want her to be your mom, you can go live there. Yeah, Tiffany's mom would not let me live there. But there's times I thought about it.
Hey, you're like going, are you doing an option program? Like a BFF?
Is that still an offer I could take you up on? But seriously, my mom would always say that I'm not Tiffany's mom. And it's so funny because when my older boys were younger and I was a single mom for many years, and they would tell me, well, I can't believe you're not letting me stay out late, or I can't believe you want to meet their parents before I go over to their house.
Right.
No one else parents ever do. You just embarrass me. And they would say names, and all of a sudden I'd be like, well, I'm not Brandon's mom. And I'm like, oh my God, I sound like my mom.
All the stuff you said, I will never be like you. And all of a sudden I'm like, ruh-roh.
I know.
I am just
like
like my parents. I was like, oh, the curse works. Because I remember my parents vividly saying, someday, all the stuff that you found us saying, you're going to say. I was like, no, never going to happen. Read my lips. And sure enough, I'm like going, oh.
I have no lips right now.
Yeah, I'm that guy. Like, I'm the manifestation of my parents.
But you know what, Chuck, what's beautiful about when you put these boundaries over our kids and you teach them how to make better choices, right? Because exactly what we're talking about today. I remember my son, Connor, he came to me probably when he was like 19, and he says, okay, don't let your head get so big, but I really do appreciate that you did check on me, that you did put these boundaries on me. He's like, I did not appreciate you taking my phone away.
Right.
Never appreciated that, Mom. Never appreciated being grounded. But I will say, I appreciate that you loved me enough, because that's his definition turned that, oh, you don't hate me.
Right.
You don't want me to kill myself because you got to go and check the parents out. You actually loved me. He says, because those kids are, God only knows what they're doing. Right. And so that shows me that putting boundaries and helping my kids realize the choices that I had to make, the pain that they had to go through, I guess, as teenagers, for me to make the right choice for them.
It's funny that you say that, because I've struggled with this, because my youngest is 16 in high school, sophomore, and having one who's a freshman in college and one who's graduating college. Can't believe it, but thank goodness. It's interesting because this whole scenario of perceived pain, by comparison to the lack of perceived pleasure.
Right.
And it's like, where do we get to this imbalance where harmony has been disrupted? Because it seems to be that there's so oftentimes people are finding discomfort and challenge with finding the upside. Like, the compelling future side is the part that feels so awkward and off, by comparison to, oh, well, the perception is going to be this, or, oh, they're going to make some snide comments. And I was like going, what language is going on in your mind? Like, right. Are you being judged all the time? And I quickly found out that in many instances, yes, the perception is that everyone's watching. And I go, who's everyone?
Right.
Like, someone chronicling your every move and posting it on all the social media outlets. It's like, oh, I mean, are you a Kardashian? I mean, it's like someone's like looking over your shoulder. And yet these are the people that other people idolize as well. And I was like going, wouldn't want that lifestyle for anything.
Chuck, you brought up such a beautiful point about something. Judgment. Judgment is such a pit of pain.
Yes.
A real pit of pain. And how many, especially with kids, because I know you work with kids too. So how many people have we seen that just we work with, just put our own kids aside, that make a decision based on staying away from the pain of judgment?
Yes.
So they will sacrifice their standards, their expectations of themselves, their potential.
Yes.
To make a choice to be something less than they want to be, or make a choice of less than a desirable choice, because they fear the pain of judgment.
The number one fear, even as adults, is the fear of public speaking. And there are people that they forlorn this even more than death itself. Like, they're just like, I can't do it. It's like, okay, wait a second. That perception, is it like judgment? Is it, because you brought up something and it really strikes home. People are marginalizing and judging self, and they're minimalizing themselves and wondering why the perception around them of everyone else. I said, because home is where the heart is. And sometimes people get that saying twisted. It's not just referring to your abode and your dwelling. Home is where you feel whole. And if within your own body, your own heart, your own integrity, your body, mind, and spirit, you're not finding value, you're not finding connection, it is unbelievable. And you and I speak about this constantly, about resonance energy and where your frequency is. I can only imagine for someone who's in that deep pit, as you talked about, of pain associated to judgment, that it's punishment.
Well, then let me ask you this, though, because so what happens when, you have to make a decision, like even in your family,
Yeah.
Like I get so upset when my husband will, like, the kids will tell me something while he's gone, right? Because I'm taking them to school and picking them up. That's generally when they're yappy and they want to talk about everything, right? Forget the 5 hours we had at home the night before where we were doing nothing, silence, zip, nothing. But in that 25-minute ride to school, everything wants to come out. Mom, let me tell you about what's going on at school. Like, now you want to have this discussion? So then I drop them off and then I'll text my husband. I'm like, hey, Sam was telling me about this. He's like, oh yeah, I already know. I'm like, He's like, well, he told me not to tell you. So the decision that he made not to tell me, it really hurt me because I look at me and my husband as a team.
Yep.
Now, I get my son is 10 years old because this happens a lot, especially with Sage. Actually, I should have used Sage because it happens more with the girl, my daughter. She tells her dad everything, everything. And it was interesting because my Mother's Day card that she made me said, and it was so beautiful because it was her true feelings, and it opened up a discussion. It says, I love you so much and sorry I'm not the perfect daughter.
Ooh.
That's what I said. I went, ooh, okay. We need to have a discussion of what we're talking about perfect here.
Right.
What expectation did I give you? Which we found out it was cleaning her room, by the way.
Yes.
So 10-year-old, we got to get in a 10-year-old mindset. Anyhow, so the point is that she talks to her dad a lot openly because apparently he doesn't care if she's perfect or not. So when I tell him things that she tells me, I'm like, we should talk about it. He's like, well, I already know about this. And I'm so hurt because I get you want to keep that rapport with her. I get you want your daughter to feel safe with you. And I want that more than anything. If you can't come to me, I'm glad you can go to your dad. At the same time, I have an expectation because my husband and I are a team. Why isn't he saying to her, look, I get you don't want to tell mom. Let's talk about that though. What is it? Well, what if she's afraid? I'm afraid mom's going to get mad because, I put a big paint spot in my carpet in my closet and you don't get mad and she gets mad. Okay, great. So she's fearing, right? She's making a choice out of fear that I'm going to punish her because if y'all could see her room and all the paint all over the floor, whole nother discussion. But why not talk to her and say to her, I get you are afraid to get in trouble. But what if I talk to mom? What if I talk to mom and let her know that I've already handled it, but you have something to tell her? What if I can help where mom's not going to be angry with you or mom's not going to have judgment? And I have told my husband this several times and he's working on it. It's gotten better. So I want to give kudos to my husband for really hearing me that it hurt me so bad because if you're hiding this from me, my mind goes to what else are you hiding? What else do you not want to tell me? And this happens a lot because we have twins, right? And he's the one that takes them to school. So he gets the yappy conversations. He's the one who picks them up. So he gets it's always a car. It's a car drive. It's literally, they love talking in the car.
Yep.
So when we're talking about decisions being made, what do we do as couples when, that situation comes up in that moment?
And you and I learned this in a lesson a long time ago with one of our mentors, Steve Linder. It's called perceptual perspective. And part of it is that there's different plateaus of pain. And what do I mean by that? Well, there's an expectation as to us as adults where we should be communicating. And so Julie and I had this situation come up last week. And Keely's our youngest, and decided that because she is so fastidious about her schoolwork and everything else, and she goes, "Kay, I wasn't supposed to be taking a quiz, and there's a pop quiz that they decided to have, and I am somewhat prepared, but not fully prepared."
So it's the fear, right? The fear of pain.
The fear of pain, and she's like, and then so she goes, "Don't tell Dad."
Oh,
And I was like,
what?
"Oh, this did like
Right.
moi." And so I'm like going, okay. So when I found out this whole little escapade that had occurred, where there was Starbucks involved and hanging out for a period, and then going back to school, and I was like,
Happy birthday, Dad.
I'm like, that's interesting. And so I started asking a few questions, and it was like, we're going deeper down the rabbit hole. I was like, okay, time out. This does not work. I have no problem you holding the space. I have a very big challenge if we're starting to twist reality a little bit to try and save people's feelings in some way, shape, or form when that was not even necessary. And so, to your point, there's a perception that someone's going to be disappointed. And here's what I realized fast forwarding to this, because the situation is the situation. The meaning we attach to it is wherever we're at in the moment, not necessarily them, wherever we're at in the moment. And I go,
it seems like both Julie and Brian are both, again, making a decision because they don't want to be that pain person.
yes,
Like, they don't want to be in pain of letting their kids down
right,
and not telling us, because if they don't tell us and they haven't let them down, then they've done good until we find out.
right.
And then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, I'm in pain again. And so now what decisions can I make to get out of pain? So we're constantly.
It's a daisy chain. Yes.
It is. And I appreciate you being so real and raw with me. So it's not just me and my husband's, but we go through this, and, and here's the greatness of it. Every one of these opportunities gives myself and my husband an opportunity to grow even better.
Yes.
Because it gives him an opportunity to say, well, I know the last thing he'd ever want to do is hurt me. Like, I know that with a shadow of a doubt.
And that question that came up in your own mind's eye goes back to some old, I'll say, history and wounds that you and I had growing up, which was, okay, if you are hiding something that's so trivial,
right?
Wait, what? Like, if it was something more serious,
maybe.
Could be, might it be? So all of a sudden, the fear factor starts to get compounded. It's
and
kind of like,
then we make decisions, right? We make decisions of, and I'm going to tell you, my decision, I go into avoidance. I'm like, I don't want to talk. I'm done. I'm hurt. I want a distance.
Yeah, and it's like, I need a timeout for moi because I'm not in my right space.
Right.
I'm like, I'm not in my right head, and I'm like going, and I'm not feeling energetically at that higher level right now. It's like, I'm at, ooh, this is smelly and stinky, and I don't like this whole experience. So to your point, I retreat, and it's one of the strangest things, and I'm noticing this more about different people's personalities. Some people become very big and outlandish, so it's like it's a trigger for them, and they go bold. So
that used to be me. That literally used to be me. I would get bigger. I would become Goliath, right? Like, I'm going to get bigger than this problem, and I'm going to show you so you don't, to fear
yes,
the consequences so you don't do it again. And by the way, if you're listening to this, that doesn't work.
No. Godzilla, it's a scorched earth policy, okay? just letting you know. Tokyo gets destroyed every time. It's cost the Japanese billions of dollars every year. It's mass hysteria. And so on the other side, but it's extremes, right? Because I don't find too many people that stay rational. And what I mean by that is like present in the moment. And they go, let's ask a higher quality question. I go, okay, whoa, I would love to be so enlightened. And there have been times when I have been, and it really depended on one big thing. And that was I the one actively involved in this, or was I a third party outside? Because then I could stay objective. But it's like when it's our kids, when it's our spouse, when it's our scenario, and I find myself dimming myself, and it's like going, okay, I need to get neutral. So what does that mean? Not get perturbed, not get uber upset. It's like I just need time.
Right.
And this is where things can get real sticky because different people have standard operating procedures for engagement. No, I just want to explain and talk about it. You go ahead. You've done enough explaining. Right now, I need a little time. Woosah. Okay,
Right.
it's like I'm gonna go get a coffee. I'm gonna go step out. I'm gonna go for a walk. You do you, boo boo. I'm gonna do me for a little bit, and we'll come back and talk about it later. Okay? Because right now, this does not want to see all of this.
Right.
It's like, wait a second, you're leaving, you're disassociating. It's like going,
But then they go back to old patterns too, right?
yes,
It's like feeling insecure. I'm not good enough. If I'm good enough, you would stay and talk. And, this is so great because literally all of these decisions come from the pain. None of the things that we have talked about yet have come from pleasure. None of it.
and that's why I say, isn't it interesting? You and I have this beautiful concept where it's not about balance in life, work life, personal life. It's
Yep.
about harmony.
Rising.
And so one of the things that I found, and this is really kind of cool when you look at science, when you have a point of origination of where the pain comes from, it takes, as it spreads and it magnifies, what bounces back is sometimes smaller in its opportunity, which means that the pleasure seems so much less available than the amplification of the challenge, the problem, the situation, the occurrence. And people go, yeah, how do we change that? I said, by reminding ourselves that that's only when it runs into force. In other words, if there's something that it's bouncing off of, then it ends up becoming marginalized. In fact, there's no place for it to go. So what actually creates more opportunity is having an open heart, open mind. And it's like, okay. And this is where as I'm saying this isn't even coming from my own brain. It's just coming from a generalization. When we forgive, and I'm talking immediately, not with any expectation, not with anything else. When we forgive, it creates freedom for the entire situation.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when compelling future and opportunity and pleasure starts to become the motivating factor. Because I know Brian very well, Julie, and neither one of them would ever intentionally harm anyone for any reason, unless someone was in absolute peril. Then they go mama bear, papa bear, and it would be ugly.
And I think like with Julie and Brian, the scenarios we used today, they were protecting their baby cubs.
Yes, absolutely. In a way that they're like going, hey, no harm, no foul, don't have to raise issue. And in fact, they're trying to save our feelings. Now, this is where it gets really twisted. They're trying to save our feelings because they're like, going, well, we just didn't want you to have any kind of trigger. We know how busy you are. We know that you work with people every single day. And I'll speak for self. They're like, what? You love to help people collaborate with them and then help them achieve different strategies and ways. In other words, you're a fixer, Dad. And I'm like, oh.
But that you're also a man and the man wants to fix.
Hello. And so they're going, okay, is it that obvious? And so that was part of it. The other part was, and this is what was so beautiful about Julie when we sat down and actually chatted about this, and with Keely too, because they both felt awful about it. And I'm like going, I felt awful. And I'm like going, okay, whoa. There was never an intention of malice. There was never an intention to hurt. There was never an intention to deceive. It was literally everyone looking out to try and make a awkward situation a better situation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, what was the lesson? What was the lesson? I said, because it's only painful when we don't get a lesson. And I go, that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt in a moment, but it doesn't continue to hurt where it lingers.
Right. Like, what are we going to do to move forward? So we got to find the gift in this.
Yes. And we all sat down. In fact, even Marina, and because she was like, stuff came out from that. And she's like, oh, it triggered her too. And I was like, okay, whoa. I didn't know that that was even a thing right now, but we'll get to that later. And it was like, so seriously, I was like, going,
Should we just keep throwing everything at Dad right now? Like, since we're on the topic.
I'm like, is everyone throwing boomerangs at the same time? Because it feels like they keep coming back and hitting Daddy in the head. And I realized something, and I said, this is an opportunity for all of us to forgive ourselves right now.
First. Yep.
First, because no one intended to harm. And they go, well, but it's still, I said, motive and intention are huge. And this is where these sayings, these soothsayings come from. It's not what you said, it's how you said it. It's like going, okay, what was the intention behind it? Because this is the miscommunication that occurs even in ourselves. I go, did you really mean to be mean? Did you really, was that your intention, was to be brash or outlandish or over the top, to go Godzilla on? So it's like, no, that was never the intention. The intention is to serve in the moment and to optimize the situation. I go, and sometimes, just sometimes, the approach vector is not the right one for that moment.
Absolutely. And, I tell people all the time, I say, my intention, I can tell you it, and I would like to say 100%, but because I want to say my integrity, I would say most of the time, my intention is pure. My delivery, though, sucks.
I've got a PhD in like experimenting. I'm like going, last time I mixed a little of this with this and it turned out pretty good. So I'm going to add a little more. And it's like, something went seriously awry. Why? Because the cake is now 10 feet tall instead of just being a regular 2-layer cake. It's like, oh, was that the intention? No, because then when you put a knife in it, it just, wait, what happened?
Right.
And so we oftentimes, based on our experience, especially as people who work in behavioral sciences and in life enhancement, to help people cope with different things, where they go, oh, I've seen this once, I've seen it 1,000 times. And I was like, well, I have stopped saying that almost entirely. And the reason for that is I go, I've seen parts of this before.
Right.
And we don't know all the nuances. So it's like, get back to basics and ask better questions. But to your point, the judgment part, I have never, ever, ever seen a scenario where judgment, irrespective of the intent behind it, leveraged a great outcome. I've seen more empathy, sympathy, understanding, collaboration, compassion. And you're like going, wow, what a deeper level of connection and meaning and engagement. Because what I thought this person had done seemed so bad or so evil or so disassociated with who they are. And it's like, they felt forced into being this way.
Right.
They're like, do you honestly believe for a moment they'd want to be this miserable? Do you honestly believe in your heart for a moment that they'd want to be this disassociated? And it's like, no. And yet, by my own admission, I've had moments where I got triggered, and it's like going, why did I feel this way? What did this really mean to me? And it was like, oh, because I wasn't in a really great place.
I don't know where I got this quote from. And sometimes I want to say, did I come up with this during my coaching, or did I hear this? I can never tell the difference sometimes, because when I'm in flow, I'm in flow. But there was this quote that I heard the other day, and I wrote it down. And it said, don't base your fulfillment off someone else's expectations.
Yes.
And that's
exactly what we're talking about.
Exactly. It's because we are so busy. I think we're seeking pleasure when we're making the decision. We're definitely seeking the pleasure. We're seeking the reward.
Yes.
And yet the ultimate thing that makes us make the decision, though, is what we're avoiding, the pain, like trying to avoid that pain,
It's a weird paradox.
Choosing the less of two evils.
Yes.
I mean, because that's what I feel like Brian did. That's what I feel like Julie did. They chose the lesser of two evils. I'm going to support my kid in the moment now because he or she needs me.
Right.
And hope that Vinu doesn't find out for a while. And I won't until my husband goes on his business trip and then they get yappy with me because I'm happy to take him again. And so it's like, uh-oh. Oh, you know that? What? Oh, sorry. I meant to tell you, but you know what? You've been so busy and I was going to tell you about it, but I already solved it for Sage. Like I already got over it. So I didn't think it was a big deal. Again, excuses, but again, he chose the lesser of two evils in that moment.
Well, in a guy's mind, it's like, oh, honey, that one's done. Done. Check.
Right.
You're done. What?
Right. And
Keep
I feel
going?
like Julie was the same way. Like she resolved it with Keely. Like she took her, got her to calm down. Don't worry about the test. You're going to be fine.
And the part that was most, now that I'm going back in my own chronology of this whole thing, I go, is that they were so nonchalant about it. Like,
Because they probably felt like they fixed it in the moment and it was good. And dad doesn't need to know. He's good. I'll take care of you. Again, so I'm going to jump on Julie's side a little bit, just being
yeah,
the mama and wanting to love her.
absolutely.
And you're my baby. And your sister and brother are off to college. You're my last one. I'm not going to get more time like this with you. Of course, I'll be there for you. Dad's working. It's fine. Like, I get where she came from.
Yes.
I totally
I do too.
where she came from. Just like I can literally appreciate where Brian's coming from. Like that is his baby girl. He has an opportunity to talk to them every day. He has a close relationship with his kids. I get it. I get it.
And when you adopt their perspective in the moment, we fully get it. And it's like, there's a saying that I often say to folks, and they go, well, if I want to get to my destination, I said, there's a million ways to get to Miami. What do you want to experience along the way?
I don't. I want to take the fastest route.
And that's people go, I need to get to the beach. Time is valuable, and I'm not manifesting more of it, and I can't bend space and time yet, Chuck. Working on it. And so, to your point, for some people, they're meanderers, and they're going, hey, we'll get there when we get there. No problem. And so, part of it is outcomes. Part of it is managing expectations. And you said something that was really beautiful and brilliant, and that is in the anticipation of having pain. And we know, and the saying is true, where focus goes, energy flows. Mm-hmm. So if people are really trying to move away from pain, oftentimes they get more of it, or they get more, they're like, ooh, I'm moving. They don't say I'm moving towards simplicity. They go, ooh, I'm moving away from complexity. And it's like, wow, why do you have 50 steps for moving away from complexity? That seems pretty complex. And they're like going, okay. And it's almost the opposite. It's like antithetical to what their outcome is. It's like, okay, then how do we change this? And that we get to remind ourselves that it's never about the one thing, it's about everything. And that harmony is literally that. It's this universal equalization that occurs when we're in freedom. Because if there's pressure from all sides, it's kind of like Prigoghine's theory, right? The Nobel Prize winning physicist, and that when pressure comes in from all sides, whatever that life form is will start to, it's going to do one of two things. It's either going to flex and it's going to morph and explode, and it becomes something that's new and evolved and different. Or it succumbs to the pressure and it stops resonating and it dies. That's the ultimate pain. And for many folks, they get in the pressure cooker and it's like, okay. And here's the interesting part. And this is where this just hit me. The disagreement is actually the explosion. And what comes from it is beautiful change.
Right.
When people get the lesson.
I think that you had a beautiful point there. Like, being a psych major, the word gestalt comes to mind, because gestalt meant the whole picture, yes. Not piecing it. As our good friend Steve Linder say, chunk up. You want to get out of overwhelm? Chunk up. Chunk the heck up so you get the top three choices or the top choice, and then chunk back down when you can handle it, right? But that's it. You got to look at the overall big picture. Like, that's what harmony is. Harmony is not looking at the bits and pieces of where do I need to put my attention? What do I need to fix today? Because when you're balancing, you're trying to fix. Yes. And when you're fixing the right side, the left side's out of balance now. Yes. So when you harmonize and you look at the whole big picture, like what does the whole big picture look like? What's the entire outcome of this? What's the outcome of my relationship with my husband? What's the outcome of his relationship with the children? And how does it all blend together? Because that's when we look at it that way, we're going to make a better choice, because that's the pleasure, right? That's making choices of pleasure. So, gosh, we only have about another 10 minutes, Chuck.
It's crazy. But
so looking at that, let's help our listeners to really learn how to flip the switch, because we've given them great, very vulnerable, experiences that you and I've recently gone through to show what happens when you're making choices to avoid the pain. How do we help our listeners to really make choices to go towards the pleasure?
anytime you get outside of self, because all suffering and pain literally comes from how we acknowledge self in the moment.
Yep.
And so Julie and I had this really beautiful conversation, and she asked the same question. She goes, well, in the future, and I said, from this point forward, what if we made a decision based on we?
Yeah.
And just me in that moment. I said, because you in the moment, you're always an amazing mom. And you in the moment were siding with Keely and helping her and supporting her, which I'm 100% for. The decision that you made, though, was not from a we perspective. It was from a me perspective.
Yeah.
And when we get that agreement frame, and it's not about managing, this goes back to kind of like levels of relationship. There's givers, takers, and then there's matchers. I said, when we're living in we're matching. And they go,
that needs to be our next show.
oh, it's really an amazing concept. And I'll say this is what's beautiful about it. It's not just being in an agreement frame, it's being in an energetic frame, which means I know you, I love you, I appreciate you. And in that space, so we agreed. It's like when the kids come to us with these types of decisions, we're going to be saying, hey, listen, it's cool, but we're going to talk about this together. And we're going to be present, and no one's going to be judging. We're going to be very calm and clear and really discuss this. It doesn't mean we're all going to be happy about the decision that's going to be made, but at least it's going to be tabled and there's going to be understanding. And that's a beautiful thing, because right now, where people get hurt is when they feel that they've been cut out of the equation. And so to your point, having this agreement frame around we, it's like, well, what would we do as parents? Because last time I checked, it wasn't parent, it wasn't singular. There's two of you.
Right.
And so I would imagine, like, even in these conversations with Brian, it's like, well, how would you feel if it wasn't we?
Right.
It was just me.
It's interesting that you had that conversation, because Brian and I have had similar conversation. When he's like, well, I don't know what to do in that circumstance because I want to support the kids. So I said, and I want you to 100%. I want you to support the kids. I don't ever want my child to feel they don't have at least one of us to go to.
Right.
Ideally, they could come to both of us. But if it's only one in the moment, okay. And how could you support them with creating a better relationship then? If they're fearing me because there's another paint spot on the carpet
right.
to match the other 20.
She's Picasso.
She is, right? And why not help her say, you know what? I really think this is a great time for all of us to talk to mom and let her know that we've already resolved it. And, I'm going to be there with you, because it's always easier. Like, I will even tell you, my husband and I have a relationship coach, and we can be upset with each other for 4 days. But as soon as we have a coaching call and we have our coaches on with us, we're gravy. We're good. We're wonderful. Just having that extra mediator there without the judgment, because I'm able to hear it differently. He's able to hear it differently, because there's no emotions involved in that moment.
Well, and to your point, this is huge. And thank you for sharing that, because that's huge. Part of this is that the we is more than you and me.
Right. Oh, yeah. The kids.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, and that's the tendency.
The outcome, right? It goes back to the outcome of the family.
It's exactly. And so people are like, oh, why? I said, because their energy's in the mix too.
Right.
And so their trepidation, their fear, the misunderstanding, the misconception. And I said, and here's the other part. They feel the way that they feel based on their life experiences to date.
Correct.
And so, and their influences that they're experiencing. They haven't had the temperament of time to help temper their experiences so that they know more. And I go, they know what they know and they don't know what they don't know. So they're expressing it and they're looking for safety. And it's like, okay, so when we can conjoin and come together as we the people, we the family, we the community, we whatever it may be, there's consensus.
This goes right back to your point about balancing. In that moment, Julie was trying to balance. In that
Yes.
moment, Brian was trying to balance.
Yes.
If they would have went to outcome, they would have looked at the harmony.
Because you
you
nailed it earlier when you said when you're seeking balance, you're taking away from one side. The scale, it's not like, oh, all of a sudden I'm pulling stuff off. It's like, no. Forgiveness, and this is the overarching, forgiveness is when you pull everything off. Everything. It's like, okay, now it's weightless. There's no judgment. There's no right or wrong. There's no bad or good. There's no positive or negative. It's like, it's just what is. It's like, wow, that feels so free. And yet people go, oh, no. But because there's still a little weight over here. It's like going, okay, then all of a sudden you start listening. And I go, and where's the harmony in that? Well, when you go back to we, it removes you or me. It removes the kid. So if you start to think of like this four-way teeter-totter, so to speak, it's like, no, it's we.
Right.
And harmony is that irrespective of how much energy is coming back and forth, to and fro, up and down, sideways, left, right, to the center, I said, it's almost like the evolution of the plates spinning because we're all moving. And when we come to the agreement frame of we're moving in the same direction.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, if you want to start making decisions, that's going to take you towards what you want, because that's the pleasure of our life.
Absolutely.
Start looking at the entire picture. Stop trying to piece it apart, because when you take these pieces, it's exhausting. When you look at the bigger picture and the outcome of what it is, you start to be able to make decisions that are going to take you towards what you want. And honestly, that's kind of what my motto is now, is the decision I'm making, is it going to take me towards what I want in my life or away from what I want? And that really brings it back to me. If it's in a way, I'm like, okay, what am I running for? What am I avoiding? What's the pain I don't want?
Right.
Taking me towards something that I'm like, okay, pleasure, be my magnet and keep pulling me towards you.
Yes. And to even go a step further, what do you need?
Right.
Because if I need clarity, if I need a connection, if I need to feel better, I go, I may want certain things to happen, but I'm like going, but what I really needed was understanding. Correct. What I really needed was honesty in the moment. What I really needed was some compassion. Like, wow, he's not so bad. Oh, he's not the dragon dad. He's not the guy who's going to push and everything has to be perfect.
Well, here's the other thing also is that, and you and I've talked about this many, many times off camera, about how people see you one way.
Mm-hmm.
And because of past references that have stacked, right? They're stacking. They don't know how to see you through a different lens, because God forbid you and I have evolved as parents. Like, we haven't, right? Like, we're still the same parents, how we were when our kids were younger and yelling and all that. Like, we've never evolved. And I try to tell my kids, I said, every day you teach me something and every day I evolve. Give me a chance.
Yes.
Don't make an assumption that I'm going to get upset for the 20th paint spot on your carpet. Like, give me an opportunity. Maybe I learned something from the last discussion we had about the 19 paint spots you had on your carpet. And that's just it. It's like teaching our kids also, like, don't make a decision off assumption, because again, pain, right? You're making an assumption that you're going to be in pain if mom finds out.
Yes.
You're making an assumption. How about give me the benefit of the doubt to say, look, I know this is not a choice that you make. I know you're not going to be happy with it. And if I could just tell you my why. Yes. And so when you said it's not just about our spouses, right? It's about our kids' energy as well. Mm-hmm. This is great, because I love that you said you kind of had like that family meeting, right? Where unfortunately you got the boomerang chucked at you a couple times. Chucked at you. That's funny. And yay, because now you guys have clarity. And and that's what we're teaching our kids too. It becomes a teachable moment of give me a chance to also be there for you, understand where you're coming from. And you're right. At the first sign of it, I might have been like, what the heck? Another paint spot? Like, how many times do we need to say paint's outside, not inside, especially not in your closet? You know, it gives us that moment to really connect with our kids and say, hey, I'm here for you.
Yes.
And I want to do better for you. I want to do better for us.
Patience is a gift, and compassion is a blessing. And when we can exercise a little of each, it will really help us slow down and be in the present moment, because that's the gift.
Well said. It's a good way to take us out, Chuck. I can't believe we're at the time.
It
Thank
goes by too fast.
It does. It does. This show can also be heard on Spanglish Radio Network. Please check out www.spanglishworld.ca for all your news and programming. Spanglish World, watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. And are we going to keep going or I don't know where they're at?